recently the Grammys got rid of the term world music over controversy that the category and the term didn't really do justice to all of the different genres globally outside of the Western sphere, specifically for African artists, because we saw Burna Boy's nomination last year in the world music category, but they replaced it with the term global music, and global is a literal synonym for world. So what do you make of that term as it pertains to African artists crossing over? And do you think that that effort makes any different in terms of how African genres and artists are perceived in the Western world?
Um, for me, the term, like you mentioned, it's similar to global world. I think it almost means the same thing. Uh, what I did like to see, it's increase in category because I feel like the continent, like Eazi mentioned earlier, is over a billion plus people. If you travel our continent, there's so much music coming from east, west, and south, and even up North Africa as well. There's just different type of genre of music, and everybody there, I strongly believe, is pulling their weight due to limited resources made available to them to make some sort of impact in their local environment and global ecosystem as well. If truly the recording academy want to start having a much impactful conversation or spotlighting or having deeper conversation with regards to fully having a what you might call proper appropriation of the efforts on the continent, the best thing to do would be increase the categories that the continent can fit into. I think for me, just the mere fact that we're having the conversation, I think is the first step in the right direction. And all this feedback, I think they should take it seriously if they want to be something more than just America and they want to really have conversation about global music. So if it's not just maybe US music or European music, because look at what there's Grammys for the Latin music, right? So Africa is
Yeah.
somewhat similar in the same population size. So at some point, it's either we have something for ourselves or the slots to put in more music from the continent or or review more projects or give more projects the opportunity. I for one, I strongly believe that nobody can tell our story more than us. The hard work sits on us. The Academy is 63 years old for the awards. Some of the countries in Africa, how old is their independency? So it's a lot of work. I think at the end of the day, the work sits on us to really, really go hard, work with our diaspora audience, work with international audience that are willing to listen and propagate the music with us. And then maybe at that point, we may even have another type of award that we think gives us that much global conversation. But for me, there's still so
Mm.
much work to be done.
Mr. Easy, I want to ask you the same question. What do you make of that term world music and global music? And do you think that Western categorization has any material influence on African cultural production?
First off, I'd like to think that nothing has no influence on anything. There's no like there's when Don Jazzy is in the studio making his music, he's actually making the music for first of all for the people in his studio to dance to, and then the people in Lagos to dance to. And so that's like the first thought. And so for me, I don't really care about whatever tag anybody puts on a category, because the fact that we call K-pop K-pop, K-pop is not K-pop because it's called K-pop. It's K-pop because of the culture, right? And so for me, I don't really care about um, the tags or whatever anybody might want to call it. I just care about the culture. When I'm in studio with Sky, or when on tour with Balvin, I'm not thinking about whether it's called urbano or whether it's called reggaeton. I'm just like in the culture, just soaking up the awesomeness of the rhythm and the energy of the fans. Like that's what's important to me as a creative. So for me, it doesn't mean anything whether it's world music or urban music or global music. And like Tega rightly said, there's the Latin Grammys. He also mentioned about putting more categories. For me, I just care about, maybe I'm sounding too much of a creative here. I just care about the scene and the culture, and yeah, that's more important to me. And collaborations like what Alex was talking about, collaborations, I think those have more to play in globalization of music, or bringing the world into one place. Yeah, that's my thoughts really. I don't really care about whatever name is called.
Tuma, I kind of want to ask you the same question now because I want to hear your answer from the perspective of someone on the industry end. What influence, material, tangible, non-tangible, do these labels have on how something gets categorized at an award show, how something gets categorized on important playlists? Um, what influence does the term urban world music have on Black artists' work? Because a lot of labels are trying to get rid of or have gotten rid of the term urban as well for the same rationale that it's been problematic for decades and they want to be progressive. Where do you
Uh,
stand in terms of labels?
so, I mean, in terms where I stand, I believe these are just words, right? And it's not the words; it's the meanings or the value you put on those words. So I believe that the argument about urban and black and global and world and even Afrobeat versus Afrobeats, it's really about like what the people decide, right? That we can't forget how much power we have or how much influence we have. The words themselves are not as influential as the people who are behind it. So I'll just go back like to the Grammy situation. Is populating the recording academy, right, with us, like that we go in there and we basically have the voting power to make these changes, or people on the inside, right? So it's the people, I believe. Same thing with the whole black music versus urban music, etc. It's about, the issue is not about the word; it's about the resources. It's about relegation, that something doesn't just get stuck in a particular category because of that word. So the thing is this. So I'm a big believer not to put too much weight on words. Put the weight on the people who can make things happen, and the words are just the tools. The words is like electricity. You know what I mean? It's not the electricity that makes this panel happen. It's the people, or the Wi-Fi, right? It's the people. So we can fix it and get everything together, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, so it's about us, and we do have that power. It's about us exercising that power, or mobilizing and infiltrating places, institutions that have long-standing tradition or prestige.
Hmm. I mean, in that same vein, Lex, what would you say that power would look like? Like, what would accountability or pressure from the people look like in terms of having the business side or the company side or the label side understand what's happening on the ground? What would you say that would look like for
I
you?
mean, I think everything's education, right? I think everything starts with educating people about the process of things. I think everything that we're talking about, whether it happened at the Latin Grammys, like
Hmm.
last year, there was a Latin Grammys. They didn't nominate any of the urban category artists, and so all the urban artists had an X over the logo and posted online, and it went everywhere. But then we went into the process of trying to figure out what that change is, and met with the Grammys, and you realize it's education, is because a lot of our communities are not educated on the process of how the Grammys even work, so then they don't become
Hmm.
voting members. So I think to give power to the people means to educate them. If you educate them about the process, if you allow them to understand what those categories mean or don't mean, or what their effect is or what they don't have, then you ultimately create power to embark in change. But without the education of the people, no matter how much we want, no matter how our superstars could influence conversation, conversation, and but without knowledge, you can't move on that, because then you can sway people whatever way you want. And so, to me, I think, and it's something that we deem super important here on our business, is how do we educate the next generation? How do we educate producers to better know how to protect themselves and fight for their rights? And we come from a business where producers are, usually mistreated. I mean, I think in the Latin business, because it was a primarily independent business, was very much, the homie hookup, you give us our beat and we go with it and forget it. Like, nobody's testing the artist or saying to the artist, well, you got to pay me for this production or whatever it is. So there's a bunch of issues that I think every industry has, and I can only speak on the industry I'm working in right now, but on the Latin business, there's a lot of structural issues as well, all leading from the Grammys all the way to things in the ground as simple as doing, recording agreements or producer agreements that just come down to education. And so I think as people of influence, as people who have any sort of title at any company or any sort of influence as a creative, our job is to try to help the educational part by doing panels like this, by creating opportunities or rounding up opportunities to support educational foundations to truly get the word out to the people on what it actually means that you're fighting for. Because I do feel, unfortunately, in the state that we are today, we get a crazy amount of influx of information from social media, from other things, but we have yet to be taught how to dissect what's actually true, what's not, how it actually works, and we just eat the perceived value that a picture on Instagram or something shows us how it's supposed to be. But essentially, to me, and I think for us as a global culture, to use that word, is the more education that we can share with our youth, the more educational parts that we can create. And that's the same about anything music-wise, like, exposure for Mr. Eazi, for example. Balvin has done an incredible job at involving him creatively in all his projects, to where in Latin America, all of a sudden, people know who Mr. Eazi is, or Cause, or Murakami, the artist. It came from educational of someone driving that consistently and saying, no, you don't understand. Mr. Eazi is the hottest thing. You have to check him out. I saw him on tour. Like, you see him on the projects. Like, every time that there's a project, we hear colleagues out of Mr. Eazi. So that educational process of gets people to be like, okay, I have an exposure now to him. Now I need to go deep and check what his music actually feels, or etc. So to kind of round up the point, though, I think education is key, and education is the true power of creating any movement or shifting our culture, or shifting the Grammys, or shifting any of these organizations.